Shalom. This week's Torah portion, Parashat Pekudei, begins in 38th chapter of Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus, verse 21, and begins with the words, This or these are the accountings of the tabernacle of testimony, and ostensibly, certainly on the surface level, the majority of this portion seems to be just that, an accounting of all of the materials, the weights of all of the materials that were brought from the free will offerings of the children of Israel for the establishment of the tabernacle. And many people look at this Torah portion, and at a glance, they come to the mistaken conclusion that it seems to be a bit redundant. After all, we've already been informed a number of times as to the construction of the tabernacle and all of the materials that went into it. And here we do have what seems to be a repetition of much of the components, the instructions that were given for what had to be created for the tabernacle, and a tally of all of these materials once again. But of course there is a principle in Torah that not one letter is redundant, that there are great lessons to be learned from every aspect of every verse, every word, every letter of the Torah, and Parashat Pekudei is no exception. And in fact, there are some extraordinary thoughts expressed here in the lines and between the lines. First of all, I would like to mention that one of the reasons why these materials are stressed again in the form really of an accounting, of a reckoning in this portion, is to stress how precious the commandment was to the children of Israel, and how precious was the fulfillment of this commandment in God's eyes. And in fact, here, the tabernacle is called, in this verse, the tabernacle of testimony, a phrase that hasn't been used until now that we have the reckoning of its actual completion. And Rashi tells us that it was a testimony for the fact that the Holy One, blessed be He, forgave Israel for the sin of the golden calf. And how was it a testimony? The fact that, in fact, God deigned to rest His presence amongst them, the Shekhinah. So, really, it was the self-sacrifice, it was the commitment of the children of Israel to bring these amounts from the goodness of their heart and to erect the place for God that served as that atonement, as it were, for the golden calf. So that's one concept, really, the preciousness of the commandment, and kind of going over these details with a great zeal and a great joy to show how, in fact, all of the materials that had been commanded, that had been actually requested, all the materials that were necessary in order to fulfill the commandments of God were in fact used in the tabernacle. They all found their way to the right source. But going back actually two portions before this, we find a very interesting idea expressed by the sages in the Midrash. It's actually quite powerful thought. Back in Parashat Kitisa, we have a verse, it's in chapter 33, verse 8, that tells us that when Moses left, and as he was going towards the tent of meeting, and all of the people got up and stood, each person in the doorway of his tent, and looked at Moshe going towards the tent of meeting, it says, V'hibitu acharei Moshe, ad bo'o ha'ohala. They all watched Moshe, they all glanced after him, they watched back of him as he was approaching the tent of meeting. And the words are, V'hibitu acharei Moshe. They glanced after Moshe, which actually also could have a connotation that they glanced at his back. And the sages point out, somewhat whimsically, somewhat ironically, in one of the Midrashic teachings, what does it mean that they looked at his back? People were commenting about how chubby he looked, how healthy. His neck was kind of fat, and they were saying, well, maybe Moshe is taking some of this money for himself, some of the gold and silver. Say, his neck looks very robust. They looked at the back of him, and then another person would say, what do you think? Of course, someone who has the job of being the treasurer over all this gold and silver and is taking it to build a tabernacle, you think he's not taking a little bit something for himself there? And of course, that's very painful to read, how the people could have suspected Moshe, who was so totally selfless, who literally, the Torah testifies about him, that he had no self, that his entire existence was for the children of Israel, to the extent that when God said, forget about them, I'm starting all over with you, Moshe said, no, erase my name, I don't want to be in the book either. But actually, it all comes together back in our Parsha this week, where when we read in chapter 39, back in Parashat Pekudei, we read in verse 32, all of the work on the tabernacle was completed, on the tent of meeting, and the children of Israel did according to everything that Hashem commanded Moshe, so did they do. And then, in verse 33, we read, they brought the tabernacle to Moshe. They brought him the tent and all of the vessels and all of the pieces. And the reason why they brought it to Moshe, our sages tell us, is because they didn't know how to build it. All of the pieces were complete. It was all ready to erect, and only Moshe had the power to bring it all together, because he was the tzaddik, the righteous leader, the selfless one, and it was only really fitting and fair and apropos that the one who so nullified himself to God and to his own people was also the instrument to be able to bring together the very paragon of humility in this world, to be able, for a person to be able to make a place for God in this world. That's what the tabernacle is all about, for a person to be able to say, our lives are incomplete. We have to make a space in this world for Hashem to come and dwell. And of course that's the lesson the Jewish people is trying to teach the whole world through the concept of the tabernacle and the Holy Temple, that we must and can make a place for God in this world, and that when we do, He will rest His presence here. And so after the false accusations that were leveled against Moshe based on his neck, and after everything the Torah testifies in this portion, Eila Pekudei, these are the accounts that every single item, every single weight, all of the gold and silver and everything precious that was brought forth went into every single detail of the tabernacle. And it's so precious, and this is very special to God, that the children of Israel came and did this, and that's why it's the Mishkan Ha'edut, it's the tabernacle of testimony, that now everything is great between us, God says. And who brought it all together? Moshe. The one who so much symbolizes what a life can be when we put our own ego aside and realize that the only purpose for our being in this world is to serve God and to serve our people and to be a pure vessel. He was one who was able to bring the pure vessel of the tabernacle to completion, to fruition, a place for the presence of God.